Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm here with Natalie Campos Goodman, who is the founder of IncentiFind. IncentiFind is the nation's go-to database for commercial real estate and home improvement incentives. Her clean PropTech startup is radically increasing green construction across the U.S. by connecting residential and commercial properties to the over $70 billion worth of incentives offered each year. IncentiFind promotes green practices such as energy efficiency, water conservation, solar, and electric vehicles, just to name a few. Natalie, so glad to have you here. You were telling me earlier today about how there's just different levels of incentives, and that is part of what IncentiFind brings together. Tell us a little bit more about those different levels.
Yeah, happy to, and thanks for having me. I guess it's kind of important to probably step back and talk about just how messy the incentive landscape is in the United States. And I think the best way to talk about that is to, kind of think globally. I'm a ex-green architect, by the way, so I got to green some of the most complex buildings globally, and I had so much fun traveling the world with an amazing architecture firm. And I got to see just how far ahead the rest of the world was in green building. Came back to the U.S., landed here in Houston, which has such a diverse community, right? And I knew that the United States was one of the leaders in offering green building incentives, right? Or incentives that would promote anything to reduce energy or water consumption in real estate, right? I asked a friend of mine who is also in the architecture engineering industry, hey, I just landed back in the US. I know that the United States offers all these incentives. Where can I find the database? And I kept asking a lot of people that question and no one knew the answer. So here I am knowing that these incentives could really curate better conversations for me as an architect with my owners. And yet no one in the industry of experts knew where these existed. So let me kind of give you the lay of the land of where these incentives are provided or the levels, right? You have federal level incentives. You have state level incentives, mostly coming out of like state energy offices, conservation offices. You have county level incentives, you have city level, you have utility, which is gas, electric, water. So 5 levels of government, all offering incentives, no single database to house or make them searchable, right? So anyways, I went on a journey to create that. And I'm sure you'll uncover in today's podcast how we're 100% an accident, but we're happy to take, that torch and run with it.
And when did that accident start?
Yeah. I guess 2018. Yeah. That's when I landed back here in Houston, went on that search. I'm not going to lie, while I had the concept, I actually wrote it down on the back of a napkin at an Indian restaurant. It was just, I said, who is going to—
All good ideas start with a napkin.
Yeah, I was going to say at Indian restaurants. Okay.
Yeah. And I thought to myself, if no one else can find this, how hard could it be to build a database, right? Here I've helped green some of the most complex buildings globally. I'm like, what? A database can't be that hard. So kind of wrote down a few little tidbits, dropped the napkin in my backpack, finished dinner, and then went on a search for like the right people, which would lead me to my amazing team members. And John Rears is one of them. He's our CTO. And I think that his coolest background is that he actually attempted to create this database with the Department of Energy before, but they went about it all the wrong ways. And I like to say that John knows all the wrong ways to build this database, and the DOE blew through, I think it's $230 million for our taxpayer money to try and build it all these wrong ways. But now he knows the right way. And that's the way we're going about it. So it started in 2018, but it would take months to find the team members. It would take months to even create data standardization, our proprietary data model. And it wasn't until about like 2019, 2020, right at the height of the pandemic, basically, that we became fully commercialized. So, perfect timing, right?
I love everything about this because I think I met you in 2018 or 2019.
Yeah.
Like it's a blur for me, but like at the city, having the same conversations, people saying, tell me about your incentives for green building, that would come up all the time. And our first answer was like, we don't do that. And people would then come back and be like, yes, you do. And be like, okay. And so like same thing of like trying to figure out where they are. And there's so many things. So before we talk about how what you're doing is so incredibly important, especially now, walk me through like how it actually works. what is your product? How could I use it? How could a city use it? Like, what does that look like? What are you guys thinking about?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, and a great way just to kind of properly introduce IncentiFind, right? So, our technology is our database, right? It's our data model. Our product is our actual data, and the way we sell our data is really two ways. Most property owners across the United States are going to find IncentiFind through their everyday PropTech software, right? If they don't subscribe to everyday PropTech software or software that helps them manage their air conditioning, their water usage, those are the most common PropTech softwares, right, that we're in, then they can come directly to our website. And the way IncentiFind works is there's actually only one process that a property owner can leverage to successfully capture incentives. They have to know what to search for. And we have a curated survey that helps them search for things based on their home improvement project or their new commercial building or existing building, upgrade. So they have to search for it properly. Then they need to know what they're eligible for. We're the only database that can, thanks to our proprietary data model and data science, right, we can matchmake any property to eligible incentives. In other words, we're going to cut through all of the other fluff and show a property owner, here's what you actually can go after based on your income level, your location, your asset type, and your scope of work, right? Once people know what they're eligible for, then they just cherry pick what they want. They may see a solar incentive, but it doesn't mean they can afford it, right? They might find in searching for a solar incentive, oh my gosh, there's an incentive for me to change out my windows, right? And really tighten up my building envelope because I'm in a hot, humid part of the country, such as Houston, right? So it's just that level of awareness that we can provide this list of eligible incentives and really let property owners choose what's right for them based on their budget, timing, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I could advocate. I use the product on one of our projects, and it was just seamless. There's a project manager who's assigned along with the process to kind of facilitate using the database and putting in the applications that still come in after you search for the right incentives. And it's nice to be able to hand things off while you're worrying about the rest of the big project. And it's just very smooth. And I think it's a compliment to just the way you've developed the customer experience.
No, I appreciate that. And that's probably, I'd say, our greatest value add is these apply services, right? Or application fulfillment services. These incentives, I like to compare them because I feel like most people can understand this. It's almost like doing college scholarships all over again, but you're in the middle of finals, right? It's because you have, you're right, Jason, you have this construction project and you need to oversee all of the nuances and variables that come with a construction project. You don't have time to be bogged down by these applications, which can be, 1 page to 15 pages. And you need to work with your engineer, your architect, your GC to populate things. You need to go photograph stuff. So we have an apply services arm of IncentiFind that once a property owner selects, they cherry pick all the incentives they want. We can say, hey, you want us to help you with these applications? We're happy to do that. So no, it's a really complimentary service. And it came out of pure demand from our users. They would tell us in the early days, hey, thanks so much, IncentiFind, for showing me all these really cool incentives, but like, who's going to help me with these applications? We didn't intend to have that service arm, but now we do.
Yeah, and we saved enough money. Definitely earned my paycheck that year. So it was good.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. Our savings, we get asked, what's an average savings for like homes or commercial buildings? And it's a really tough thing because not every upgrade is the same. Not every construction project is the same, but we ran the numbers regardless. So I'll happily share. For a home improvement project, which we would define a vanilla home improvement project in the United States, it needs to be more than just changing out a washing machine, right? So it's definitely changing out some major appliances, perhaps a change of roof. They can expect about 17% savings depending on what they spend. So average home improvement project, including a roof, would probably be about $50,000. So 17% savings is really nice. For commercial, the spread is incredibly wide just because commercial assets can be 1 million square feet or like 10,000 square feet, right? So we like to just put a more blanketed approach to that. And it's about $40,000 to $50,000 is what we were seeing across the US, which ask any commercial property owner or developer, if they want just an extra $50K in their pocket, they're going to say, yeah, especially with inflation going up, right?
And this is hugely important when you think about policy, right? The number one thing that when policymakers, when cities and government officials talk about energy efficiency, they talk about climate, you always talk about the savings, right? That is the sustainable thing to do for the environment, but also for you financially. And so that being said, these are the things that can help move policy. Or in a state like Texas, where we don't have requirements, we don't have those overarching mandates, right? It's a carrot or the stick situation. You only have carrots. And so incentives are huge. Being able to find them, a very important first step, right? It is a very large state. There are programs all over. Even if you think about Houston, we think of us as one community, but we're actually a patchwork of like 13 different counties. And depending on where you are, depending on your utility, it's not always the same. Depending on your mud, like who you get your water from, there's all types of things that this is hugely important. And then having folks to help walk you through that process and help communicate the benefits again is a huge tool. And I know that that was something that the city of Houston was looking to and really couldn't find. And it was hard for us because we were like, well, no one wants us to put in that stick unless we don't have carrots. We are in the grocery store. We have no idea what we have, right? And trying to find them. And so you guys, I remember that conversation. I remember thinking like, oh my goodness. It was eye-opening for me to realize that there were so many places that we should be looking that we didn't know. And we did our best to put them together. And then now, years later, we have a whole new set, like a whole new section in the grocery store, thanks to the IRA and thanks to a lot of the new programs. So talk a little bit about that. And what does that mean for you as your outlook on your product and going forward?
Yeah, we get asked about the Inflation Reduction Act a lot. I think my entire month of February is going to be tied up in those speaking events, and we're excited. We're stoked. The passing of the IRA. If you think about IncentiFind, right before the IRA, we had found about $70 billion per year to throw at an $18 trillion problem. The $18 trillion problem is the fact that half of America's homes and commercial buildings are 40 years old and have never been upgraded. Extremely wasteful, right? A huge burden to our existing and aging infrastructure. So we found this $70 billion we could throw at this $18 trillion problem. IRA bills passed. And it's allocating an additional $400 billion, right? It has to be spent in like less than 10 years.
No big deal.
Yeah. I mean, the entire team, if you had us all in a room, because we sit across the nation, I'm sure all of us would have dropped our coffee the second that thing was passed. It was one of the most exciting acknowledgments that we all know real estate's one of the most polluting assets. 60% contributes to 60% of global greenhouse gases, right? And we have all this money we can throw at this problem. And now we're going to increase those funds. We're stoked. Now, is it going to be an easy process? No, nothing's really easy. But what we're happy to disclose, and what my talks, coming up in February will also go over, is that federal funds, especially on the residential sector, have already been allocated. So homeowners can expect some really nice tax-related incentives for their home improvement projects that they all need to be making, whether it's climate change that's causing unexpected improvements or just the regular aging of a home, right? So those are the first funds that have been allocated. As the funds go past the federal level into the state and the county and the city and the utilities, it's going to get a little messier, and it's going to take a little longer for them to hit something like our database, right? Which does coalesce all of these incentives. And that's just a natural process. I was mentioning that, some states are going to do it really well. Massachusetts has phenomenal state-run programs. They're so well-established. I could see those funds going directly into those well-established programs. And the folks in Massachusetts are just going to get to take advantage of more money, which is awesome. California will do it well, too. Again, they have phenomenal state-run programs. It's going to be difficult in a state like Texas. We're a little more disjointed, and that's just the nature of our politics, right? I think what property owners can expect in Texas is, look, take advantage of the current funds. There's plenty of them. $70 billion is already available every year. Just start using those now expect those funds to begin trickling down in about 1 to 2 years. So, yeah.
So what I love about this is that often the companies that we talk to and the technology that's being developed is utility scale, or it's still a couple of years down the road, and it may change the way our lives operate, but in my daily life, I won't be the one operating it. This is something that individuals have control over, right? Jason continues to go on this house journey. Who knows how many more incentives he's going to be using, right? He's going to be searching daily to see what becomes available and what he can take advantage of. And that is very important to our like collective climate action story. So I love it. And then also, you know, talking about Texas, talking about California right now, this is one of those things where it's a climate initiative. It helps us reduce emissions, but it also improves your resilience.
Yeah.
And so if you're talking about windows, you're talking about heat pumps, like a lot of the things are both sustainable and resilient. And so that's another kind of selling point. It is hard to find and there will be new things, but to the folks listening, like this is really exciting to me because it is something for everyone.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, property owners are now positioned to tell their state, local governments where their market interest and demand for going green is. And our database allocates for all of that, right? That's sort of our phase one of IncentiFind was, let's just coalesce these incentives and make them easy to search, easy to use, right? That was kind of phase one. And we're about to complete that phase in about 30 days. Phase two is now handing over these analytics to state, local governments because they work so hard on many of these programs, I'm sure, like you know, and yet have no visibility to the utilization or how they compare to other states. I mean, think of all of the knowledge transfer that can occur if, you know, with these phase two products that we're going to put out in the next, 12 months, where cities can compare flood mitigation strategies using incentive programs, right? Or energy efficiency programs or water conservation in a lot of the drought-prone parts of the country. That's the kind of power we want to give to both the property owners and to the suppliers or the, gut levels of governments that provide these incentives. And our phase two will allow that conversation to sort of happen in a digital space, which is pretty cool.
And so you're hearing there's a desire for benchmarking, or is it against city to city, or is it just internal benchmarking?
It's all of it. I won't disclose which cities, but we've had a few already come out. They learned about us through some of their real estate folks, developers that are trying to bring job opportunities to cities, right? They said, well, how can you help all of our constituent base, right? Or from low income to those that are going to bring, nice jobs. So it's a little bit of benchmarking, but also what are these new innovative programs and how can I use these incentives to help me achieve goals of my climate action plan or sustainability plan or resilience plan? Because many states are in a very reactionary position, like Florida with, the hurricanes that continue to bombard it, California with a lot of the fires. So no, I think governments are desperate for any kind of data. We want to be as transparent and helpful as we can.
There's a ton of benchmarking that goes on, right? Yeah. Shame is a huge policy driver. The shame and like the comparing of states, comparing cities, comparing neighborhoods. That it happens at every level that you mentioned, like developers. When folks are looking at where they want to build another neighborhood, they pit city with city, county with county, and they lay them out and they say, where is it the most advantageous for me to go? And that trickles down to like city sustainability offices that are not in the property development business most usually. And so suddenly they have a whole new level of competition. And having that information readily available is hugely helpful because you can then take that back and say, look, we're losing out. We're losing jobs. We're losing new residents. We might be losing existing residents because they're moving somewhere else because not only are they fancy schmancy neighborhoods, they have things like flood control, right? They're putting in better energy efficiency programs. So my home is going to be better insulated, more resilient, more sustainable, all of these things. So I'm just excited and jealous that it didn't exist when I was trying to put all of this together, but it will be so helpful.
No, thank you. And we want to put it together as quickly as possible. It's such a slippery, it's like trying to hold a slippery bar of soap, right? It's just the data is constantly changing and it should. If you think about it, technology is ever changing, right? Something new is coming out, and I'm sure your podcast covers so much of this new, exciting, clean technology that's coming out of right here in Houston. We want our database isn't stagnant, right? It's meant to be dynamic to continue to promote this ever-changing environment, not only for the technology, but for the policies. And as climate change continues to just wreak havoc across the United States, cities especially are going to have to be poised to address, properties that are insured, properties that are uninsured, how to continue to attract a taxpayer base, right? I feel for a lot of these state, local governments. Honestly, I can't imagine the complexity of weight that's on their shoulders. And I just hope that we can get to these next set of, phase 2 products and show them the market interest and demand for going green, show them the opportunity for how to leverage incentives to better achieve that goal and retain that taxpayer base while achieving, sustainability goals or whatever it is that they're setting out. So I don't envy a lot of those positions, but we have our heads down working, to see how we can be helpful to them.
Do you track the types of incentives that you see coming to the market?
Absolutely.
Like, do you see trends? Are there some things that are like more popular right now? I can think of some, but I'm curious because you look at the whole country.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So we have it's called a market intelligence dashboard, and it's really cool. The country will kind of light up, and it changes all the time. So like if you select, all right, energy efficiency might be hot on certain asset types over others. For example, hospitality, it's always going to be, the brightest color of, high activity. Multifamily, the same thing, right? Offices, not so much. A lot of folks are still trying to return to the office, right? So you had a huge change there. And it depends what's happening. During the pandemic, our database, it glittered with activity for anything HVAC because property owners were in a hurry. How do I bring my people back to the office or school or university or whatever it was and make sure that the air quality is safe for them, right? So I think the really cool thing about incentives is that they can be applicable to a lot of our ever-changing needs. And I'd say the hottest incentives we have right now are all going to be related to housing. We have a housing crisis. It's across the country. So it depends what state you're in. We can see home improvement lighting up like in Boise area where the market's incredibly hot. People are trying to rapidly fix homes to attract, the bestseller. You've got a ton of unfortunate home improvements happening across Florida right now, $100 billion worth of damage with Hurricane Ian, right? And so, it's a constantly changing landscape. But if I had to just put a pin in it today, I'd say it's anything and everything housing, from single family to multifamily. Senior housing is an emerging incentive. We have an aging population. Yes, there are a lot of incentives specifically for senior housing. And I'd say the one category to watch, water conservation. It has come out of, I feel like, nowhere. Many programs are piloted through IncentiFind. You can only find them in our database. We're pretty stoked that folks trust us with that, right? And I'd say water conservation has had a huge spike. The funding is still kind of lacking. I'm hoping the IRA funds will kind of trickle in that area, but half of the country is drought prone. So if you think about, it takes energy to pump water through a building or a home. You want to hit two birds, one stone. Water conservation is where it's at. But
so you just reminded me of a really big change that I remember, like 2019, cities everywhere were focused on really large buildings, office space. What are we going to do? That's where all the people are. They're energy hogs. And then the pandemic happened, and it was like you took all of our goals and strategies and actions and put them into a blender. They're still there, but kind of like what came out on the other side is a different combination. And so exactly right. Like it moved to residential because not only are people working from home, we were in our homes for a long time. And then you layer on, like, we keep getting hammered by some form of climate change. And so like our homes are suffering. But now we do also see that because as people are trying to go back to the office, trying to attract people back to the office space is changing, and that they're all getting these amazing remodels, right? I am jealous of some of the offices that I used to work in, and I have seen them now. And I'm like, wow, it was not like that before. And that's really interesting and exciting, but also kind of gets to that strange nature of like, we really should do things now, because the earlier and the sooner you can prepare for these things, it's going to come later on. And you're going to be like, oh, I'm so glad I put in that. I have a friend who lives in California, and they just waterproofed their backyard because they live on a slope in a canyon. And that canyon, like major flooding, major water coming through. And they just did that, because they're like, we probably should do this. And she's like, that was the best investment we've ever made. Yeah. So it's exciting. And like the world is showing us why these things are important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of, that resonated with me, because during the pandemic, hotels occupancy was down, right? They were the hottest asset type with the most renovations happening. Because what better time to renovate and finally address all of these, energy efficiency, water conservation goals than when your occupancy is down, right? So they leveraged incentives to help kind of brace their pocket. Line their pockets a little bit, right? Their budgets were going to be extremely low. They took a risk, but now they get to reap the benefits. So I think you're right. If real estate can realize that there's a return, there always has been a return on investment in greening a property or making it more resilient and sustainable, but do it now, get ahead of it, because climate conditions are only going to worsen, right? And it's going to, it's like having that rainy day fund, but in your real estate asset, right? So it's just, now's the time to go for it. And there's more money than ever. So we hope to get folks moving, right?
So I'm always curious about now's the time. And you obviously didn't start the business today. You started it a few years ago.
Yeah.
And there's a question of technology and markets in here, but why didn't IncentiFind exist a decade ago?
Man,
and what's changed?
I wish I actually knew, other than my influence on starting the company, like why it didn't exist. It's one of those concepts when I get up, and whether I'm pitching to, investors or, signing a deal with a new partner, it's like, I get asked that a lot. Why did this not? I have no idea. I was overseas working. I was not even in the United States, right? So all I can think is that maybe folks just didn't know this much money was out there. When we looked at the statistics, when we finally coalesced all the incentives and their value across the United States, we knew $70 billion was available every year to throw at this $18 trillion problem. We also found out half of it goes unused simply because of lack of awareness. So perhaps that's the reason, this database never existed, is that I think there was a huge lacking awareness that incentives in this nature even existed, right? That there was that much funding. Now our competitive landscape is increasing, which is exciting. I know most startups would probably be sweating. We want that. There's a lot of education to do on incentives, so we can't be the only ones, with the horn in our hands. But we'll take the timing, now and continue to run with the torch, right?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Houston?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So obviously you came back from being international, and you started the business here. How did Houston support you starting your business?
Yeah, so Houston's awesome city. I have no personal ties to it. I mean, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, love my hometown. I was just repatriated back here. My last contract before I moved back to the United States was Shell Real Estate. So I was helping to green Shell's largest real estate portfolio across Asia Pacific. So they just happened to repatriate me here. And Houston's just so diverse, not only in its people, its culture, but what you have access to as far as knowledge, right? And I think it's a very friendly city in the sense that I could go to the city of Houston. How many other cities are just going to open their doors, like, come on in. We know you're new and you're a startup, but let's talk, right?
Yeah,
let's roll up our sleeves.
Please come in.
I think it has that very friendly culture to it, and it's very open-minded, and I think our diversity plays a huge part in that. Why we've stayed here is honestly, I love the city. Greentown Labs coming here was it was a huge part of retaining us. I was in Austin every other week before Greentown Labs arrived, honestly, because I didn't really have a home base as a clean prop tech startup, right? I could find that in Austin. I could find it in Boston. I could find it, in the Bay Area. I could find it in New York. Couldn't really find it here. But now that home base is here, good luck getting us to leave. We like it. It brings a lot of different awareness, to IncentiFind as far as the upcoming technologies that we need to keep our database ready for as well. So I don't know. I come back to the word just diverse culture here.
Yeah. I remember when we first met, I think you were working out of the station.
Yeah.
Yeah. Long time ago. So that was ancient history.
It's the ecosystem here has evolved a lot, and I think all in good ways, right? And now it seems to have some real staying power because I don't go to Austin that much anymore.
Right. Well, and so one of the fun facts about Houston that a lot of people don't know is that Houston is one of the top cities in the US for green buildings, a leader in the Department of Energy's Better Buildings Challenge. Houston and Dallas are always rivaling each other for the number of LEED buildings, LEED certified space. And I know it's interesting to me is you wouldn't think that. And that when you look at the type of companies that are in those spaces, a lot of them are energy companies. A lot of them are traditional oil and gas companies. But that's because they have really nice buildings. They're always building new buildings. And it's that competition, right? The competition to keep employees, to keep new talent coming in. And so that was always a really big selling factor for the city when we're talking to those other tiers and being look, if these guys can do it, you can too. It's not that hard. It's working for them. They do it because it's smart for their business. It's smart for their buildings. It's smart for their people. And I wish we had ways now to talk about that more. Buildings it's a hard one to get people really excited about. During the pandemic was a strange time where people were please tell me more about building efficiency. What can I do? People like Jason became obsessed with DIY home renovation projects. So I love that about Houston, and it's one of our funny little quirks that people are really? Be yes, look it up.
No, it is. It's an awesome city. It doesn't matter if it's green buildings or food, right? I think you've got a wide variety of things to choose from, take part in, learn from. So no, the city's awesome.
Yeah. What are you most proud of in the city around the innovation ecosystem?
Oh man, honestly, it's changing for me. I think what I'm most impressed by is I'm traveling less, which is great. And I know that sounds crazy, but if I could pull up my calendar for the past 3 years, you'd see Houston was rarely on it. And now I think it's attracting some fantastic, speaking events. And it's also just attracting better partnerships. I can have meetings here because we now have groups or focuses, that pertain to clean prop technology, right? So I think I'm most impressed with having less of a travel schedule and staying home and knowing that staying home, I am going to get the best access to a network.
I think so. One of the last questions I want to ask you is, do you have a personal climate impact story?
My personal climate impact story, I think, is a story of IncentiFind. Here I was. I love my corporate job. I had no desire to leave it, to be honest. To touch some of the most complex buildings, to live in a new country, at least every 6 months. What a great job, right? But to realize that wasn't sustainable, that change needed to happen, that we need to be thinking about our built environment. As an architect who has an education in environmental design, look, who better to step up, right? Now's not the time to ignore the need that we have to green our built environment. Now's the time to lean into that. So, I think IncentiFind is my climate impact story.
Yeah, good. Do you feel like when you think about the Houston ecosystem here, are there any gaps that we need to work on as a community?
Gaps in the Houston ecosystem. I think there's always going to be gaps. It depends who you're talking to, right? So if I'm going to wear, so I think if I'm going to wear first a hat of a female founder, I would like to see more events that talk about not just putting a female founder on the stage and saying, wow, what have you done to overcome all these hardships? But instead reverse the conversation and say, how our community is stepping up to help you because we know you have additional adversity against you, right? I'd love to see that conversation reversed. I've seen it done elsewhere. I would like to not be, on stage with just a few other female solo founders, right? Trying to teach an entire ecosystem about how I've had to dance and tap dance around things and jump through hoops. I love to hear my ecosystem tell me.
And let's talk about that. Like, what are the hoops that you have to jump through that male founders don't have to, just so we can educate people about how unfair it is?
Access to funding is kind of the first one. So if we just look at the statistic, because I was born Hispanic and female and decided to be a solo founder, I have access to 0.6% of funding. I mean, that's ridiculous. Doesn't matter how good I am. That's just that's my luck of the draw. Why? I don't know. I didn't create it. Super happy to be female, Hispanic, and solo founder. Not so proud that, others want to put me in a box because of that. So I think looking for our ecosystem to say, hey, we know that that's something you didn't ask to be part of, but here's how we're going to change it, right? Or here's what we can do, or here's how we can help you not feel so isolated and lonely, or have sometimes, there's days, I'm not going to lie, I really am frustrated, it's just not fair, but it's not going to stop me. It hasn't yet.
So I have a question kind of on that, because obviously the disproportionate nature of funding in climate tech is absurd, like absurd.
Yeah.
But you are a different kind of climate tech than a lot of what you think about. Like, you're not battery, you're not EV, that you're buildings, but you're also like much more traditional in a lot of ways. How does that resonate with funders? How does that resonate with the audience that you talk to? And do you focus on climate tech focused VCs? Like, do you cast a wider net?
I think it's the first time someone's asked me the question in such a great way and broken it down to where, let me kind of just reply to each of those questions. So absolutely, we are more traditional. So we can't approach VCs with, hey, we have a new sexy technology, right? We have a very good business model and a very logical solution that's going to appeal to a certain type of investor. We've luckily found those. Second thing, we resonate with property technology focused VCs, climate tech as well. But again, they need to be more about a fantastic business model than about a new sexy technology, right? And then, I have to approach it with the giant elephant in the room that it's like, yes, I am a solo founder. Yes, I happen to identify as female, right? Yes, I am Hispanic. So I look for VCs that I can have that tough conversation with right away and up front, and I watch how they react to it. And if it's uncomfortable, the relationship's not going to work. And if they're, kind of lean into it or like, that's not a problem, so I see you as another human, it's like, great, let's go. But yeah, as a founder, you've got to break up all of the different facets of how your company could appeal to investment and kind of tackle it, with each facet being its own strategy, right?
Well, I'm fascinated by the difference between like innovation and invention, and that like spectrum of, are you just tweaking something perfectly ordinary and making it have a climate component, or are you inventing something that will change the way we work? And I also just struggle to the point that I sometimes don't like to talk about it, about how it does not matter who you are. It does not matter the color of your anything. Like, I try to just focus on the words that I'm saying. Yeah. And when people don't, like, my brain shuts down a little bit. And I know we need to talk about that more. And we need to talk about how absolutely ridiculous that is. But you are a rock star. And I think both you and the words that you are saying and the technology that you are putting forward is amazing. So I think we're coming up on time. My last kind of incentive question, since this is a really hot topic right now, natural gas. Like, in climate news today, the federal administration has been talking about natural gas stoves, right? And that there's studies coming out saying that this is maybe not healthy. And when you think about it, if you live in a small apartment like I do and you have a natural gas stove and you are like basically inhaling the fumes from that, probably not the healthiest thing in the world. And there's science to back it up. I know that that was always a contentious topic for cities, and there are more and more incentives, but also more policies. So in your kind of like national expertise and overview of everything that's going on, what do you see going on there? Do you have predictions for the future?
Yeah, for natural gas, all I can do is look at, historicals, and perhaps that'll give shed some light on predictions, right? Natural gas, it is the smallest sliver of incentive, category in our database. Against water conservation, energy efficiency, renewables, electric vehicles, and so much more, right? I mean, just a tiny, tiny sliver. And it depends if you're in a deregulated market or regulated. I can tell you the amount of incentives available in more competitive markets, higher amount of incentives. It is a way to attract a basis of new, bill payers, right? And as far as natural gas promotions within real estate, I mostly see them like with boilers or larger pieces of equipment. We're seeing them less and less at the stovetop level, right? But it's going to be mostly in larger pieces of equipment. They pay out pretty substantial, so they're incredibly lucrative. But substantial amounts of efficiency need to be occurring as well. So I hope that trend continues. Honestly, on the larger equipment front, I don't have much of an opinion on the smaller equipment, but would love to see, any sort of conservation for energy or water or gas happen, as a trend going forward.
The electrification of everything is a pretty solid trend, right? So I think we're going to see that moving forward. But at the same time, I know just from a regulatory perspective, it's very hard to take technology that is in people's homes away. And so after that study came out, there was a very big push to be like, no, we're not actually coming to take your stoves, right? Like it's more about as we think about new building code, as we think about new construction, as you think about what we're putting in new things. And then also like, what does our natural gas infrastructure look like? We saw during the winter freeze here that it's not infallible. We saw that during the most recent little mini freeze. Like there were still issues. And then you saw that nationwide that there's still things. So I think that's really interesting to me because I was personally on the receiving end of people like, no, my friends are like, Laura, you're talking about natural gas. She's like, but I love my stove. Like the stove, like I love my children and I love my stove. Like it was on that level of just personal, visceral reaction. And I was like, well, think about it. And they're like, do you eat my cooking? I'm like, yes. Like, you don't touch the stove.
My wife would say the same thing. So I understand. So I guess as we wrap it up, when we think about the audience that's listening here today, what is something they could do to support you?
Yeah, I think come to visit our website, IncentiFind.com. Look, everyone has a home improvement project going on. So everyone, is in some way, shape, or form tied to the overall real estate market. Share the word because we all want to live in healthy homes. We want to work in healthy offices. And we don't want to have, exorbitant amounts of, monthly bills when it comes to electric, water, gas, because let's be honest, it's all going to come down to the everyday folks paying that, right? Forking out the bills for it. So let's just green real estate. It's going to start a lot of the times at home, as well as spreading the word to wherever you office. So that would be my advice.
Good. And if people want to connect with you personally, where should they find you?
Oh, so I'm not, big social media. I've been told to be more active on it, but LinkedIn, I will say I at least have that down. So LinkedIn is definitely where to find me.
Okay. Do you have any last thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
No.
Well, I want to know when your next phase, the city resilient sustainability package comes out. I will share that with everyone that I used to work with because I think that's just the greatest thing since sliced bread. So I'm so excited to have you on today and, appreciate it. Appreciate all that you do.
Oh, well, thanks for having me, y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.